Hello and welcome. Today we're continuing our journey through OSHA's Process Safety Management elements. In this video, we'll dive into the fourth element of PSM, operating procedures. Don't worry, we'll keep it conversational and simple. By the end, you'll see how clear operating procedures can prevent accidents and save lives. Let's get started.
First off, what are operating procedures in the PSM context? Simply put, they're the written instructions that tell workers how to safely operate a process. Basically, the playbook for running a chemical plant or any facility with hazardous processes. Think of operating procedures like a recipe or a pilot's checklist for your facility. They list each step to take in order so that everything runs smoothly and safely. If you follow a recipe correctly, you get a good meal. If you follow operating procedures correctly, you get a safe and stable operation, and everyone goes home in one piece. Operating procedures are so important that OSHA made them one of the 14 required elements of PSM. They require clear, written instructions for safely conducting all activities in each covered process. The key word is clear. These procedures have to be understandable to the people who use them, not written in some confusing technical jargon or legalese. An OSHA guideline actually says procedures should provide clear instructions for safely conducting activities in the process. In other words, anyone operating the unit should be able to read the procedure and know exactly what to do. So why do we need these? Because when things get hectic or when unusual situations happen, a well-written procedure is your best friend. It's like having a road map when you're driving in a new city. Without it, you might take a wrong turn into danger. In process safety, wrong turns can lead to explosions, fires, or toxic releases. Operating procedures help ensure consistency so that every operator performs critical tasks the same safe way every time. They also serve as a training tool and a memory aid. Even experienced operators can forget a step. We're all human. But a checklist or procedure document can catch those slip-ups before they cause a problem. In short, operating procedures are the backbone of safe operations. They translate all that technical process safety information into day-to-day actionable steps for people in the plant.
Now let's talk about developing these procedures and making sure they're clear and accessible. Writing a procedure isn't just a paperwork exercise. You're writing instructions that real people will use, often in high-pressure situations. That means write for your audience. Use simple, straightforward language that your operators are comfortable with. A good rule of thumb is to imagine explaining the task to a new coworker. Use short sentences, active voice, close valve A instead of valve A should be closed. And avoid unnecessary jargon. If technical terms are needed, make sure they're defined or commonly known by the crew. The goal is that any qualified operator can pick it up and follow it without confusion. Remember, a procedure that is too wordy, overly complex, or full of bad grammar can be just as bad as not having one at all. If it's hard to read, people might ignore it. Visual aids can be a huge help too. Don't be afraid to include flowcharts, diagrams, or pictures in your procedures. For example, a flowchart could guide an operator's decisions during a complex emergency shutdown, or a simple diagram could show which valve is which. If the procedure says open valve V101, a small photo or P&ID snippet of V101 can eliminate any doubt. Some companies even color code or label equipment to match the procedure steps. Anything to make the right action obvious. Think of how assembly instructions for furniture have diagrams. Your operating procedures can use the same idea. The point is to make the procedure as user-friendly as possible so that operators will actually use it, not shove it in a drawer. Another tip, involve the people who do the job when writing or updating procedures. Operators and technicians usually know the ins and outs of the process, and they'll tell you if a certain step is impractical or if something's unclear. By involving them, you also get buy-in. They'll be more likely to follow a procedure they helped craft. It also ensures you capture those tricks of the trade that experienced workers use, as long as those tricks are safe and within the rules. The best operating procedures combine engineering knowledge from process safety info, P&IDs, etc., with hands-on knowledge from the field. When you merge those, you get a document that is both technically correct and realistic for day-to-day operations. Lastly, make sure procedures are easily accessible to the people who need them. OSHA actually requires that operating procedures be readily accessible to employees working in or maintaining the process. This could mean a binder in the control room, laminated copies in the unit, or an online database. Whatever works, as long as when someone needs to follow a procedure, they can get it within seconds. A procedure that's locked in the safety manager's office or buried in a computer folder nobody uses is not going to help in a pinch. Many companies are now using digital tablets or control system displays to pull up procedures at the console. The bottom line, if you want people to follow procedures, make them easy to find and use. So we know we need clear, user-friendly procedures. But what specific content do these procedures have to cover? OSHA's PSM standard actually spells out the minimum elements. Don't worry, I'll break it down in normal language. Think of it as a checklist for your checklists. First, procedures must cover all operating phases of the process. A common mistake is to only write procedures for normal, everyday operation and forget about the other modes. But operators need guidance for everything. Initial startup of the process, when you first bring equipment online. Normal operations, the routine running conditions. Temporary operations, maybe a special run, or a bypass situation. Emergency shutdown, including when an emergency shutdown is needed and who has authority to hit the ESD button, so to speak. This should detail the conditions that require an emergency shutdown and assign that responsibility to qualified operators for a safe, timely shutdown. Emergency operations, basically how to operate during emergency conditions. For example, how to keep a furnace cool if a feed stops, or how to handle a power failure. Normal shutdown, how to take the process down in a controlled way. Startup after a turnaround, or after an emergency shutdown. Starting up isn't always the same after maintenance or after a sudden stop, so this needs its own procedure. In short, any mode the process can possibly be in, there should be procedures for it. Imagine a timeline of your process's life cycle from startup to shutdown. Every segment on that timeline should have instructions, no gaps, because gaps leave room for guesswork, and guesswork and hazardous chemicals do not mix well. Next, for each operating phase, the procedure needs to specify the operating limits, basically the safe operating window for key process parameters, temperature, pressure, flow, and others. It's not enough to say, maintain 100 degrees Celsius. You should tell the operator the acceptable range, like maintain 100 degrees Celsius, allowable range 95, 145 degrees Celsius. The procedure also must state what to do if you go outside that range, both the consequences of a deviation and the corrective steps to get back to normal. This is super important. If things start to go wrong, the operator shouldn't have to wonder, what happens if it overheats? Or, what should I do now? The procedure should have that info right there. For example, if a step says to feed a chemical at 40 lbs min, the procedure might note that the normal range is 30 to 50 lbs min. It would then say what could happen if you go above or below that range. Like, if feed rate is too high, the reactor could overpressurize, and what corrective action to take. If rate exceeds 50 lbs min, gradually throttle back the pump and verify reactor pressure. Providing that context turns a procedure into a kind of decision aid. It helps the operator recognize a problem and fix it before it becomes an accident. Another required section is safety and health considerations. In every operating procedure, there should be information or references about the hazards of the chemicals and the process. This includes the properties of the chemicals. Are they toxic, flammable, corrosive, etc., and what precautions to take to prevent exposure or incidents. For example, the procedure might remind you, chlorine gas. Extremely toxic. Ensure scrubber is active and wear appropriate PPE when opening this valve. It should also cover what to do if exposure or contact occurs despite precautions, like emergency measures, wash stations, evacuation, etc. Additionally, procedures should mention any special hazards or unusual situations to watch out for. For instance, if a particular reaction can produce an unstable intermediate, or if a certain cleaning step can accidentally create a hazard, that should be noted in the procedure. Essentially, it's a built-in safety briefing. As you follow the steps, you're reminded of the key hazards and safety measures at each point. Along with that, procedures should reference or integrate safety systems and their functions. If your process has alarms, interlocks, relief devices, or emergency shutdown systems, the procedure should acknowledge them. For example, it might say, verify that high-pressure alarm XYZ is armed. Or, in case of high pressure, relief valve RV10 will open to protect the system. Do not try to block it. This way, operators understand how the automatic safety systems fit in with their manual operations. To recap this part, a good operating procedure is comprehensive. It's not just turn this valve, start that pump. It's a full recipe that covers when to do things, all phases, how to do them, what limits to stay within, what if something goes wrong, and what the hazards are every step of the way. It should also be written clearly as we discussed. It's a tall order, but it's absolutely doable. And it's required by law for processes covered under PSM.
Having an excellent procedure written is great, but it won't stay excellent forever. Processes change, equipment gets updated, or we find better ways to operate. That's why another crucial aspect is regular review and updating of procedures. OSHA PSM requires that operating procedures be reviewed as often as necessary to keep them current, and at least once a year they must be certified as accurate. Think of this like an annual checkup for your procedures. You go through each one and say, is this still correct? Did we install a new pump that changed the startup? Did our process conditions change? Has there been a suggestion from an operator or an incident that we need to incorporate? If yes, update the procedure. Then document that you checked it. This annual certification is basically the company's signed promise that, yes, these procedures are up to date and reflect reality. But don't just wait for the yearly check if something changes sooner. Management of change, MOC processes, should tie in here. Whenever a change is made to equipment, chemicals, or operating conditions, one of the checklist items in MOC is, do we need to update the operating procedure? If the answer is yes, update it before the change is implemented, or at least before startup. We want the written procedures to match what's actually happening in the plant at all times. Outdated procedures can be dangerous. They might have wrong set points, refer to equipment that's no longer there, or miss new hazards. In fact, one of the common pitfalls is outdated procedures. If you don't incorporate feedback and changes, people lose trust in the document. And as the saying goes, procedures are ineffective if they are not up to date and routinely followed. So keeping them current is not just a bureaucratic exercise, it's literally ensuring the procedure remains a useful safety tool. Also, make sure to keep version control on your procedures, have a revision number or date on each document. That way, everyone can confirm they have the latest version. It's a good practice to remove or clearly mark obsolete procedures so nobody accidentally grabs an old one. Some companies use a centralized digital system for this. The key is, at any given time, operators should have confidence that the procedure in their hand is the correct, approved, up-to-date one. Now we've got clear, comprehensive, current procedures. The next step is making sure people know them and use them. This boils down to training and organizational culture. OSHA's PSM mandates that each employee operating a process must be trained in the operating procedures relevant to their duties. This includes initial training for new operators, or when someone moves to a new process, and refresher training at least every 3 years, or more often if there's a big change or if performance suggests they need it. The training isn't just reading the procedure, it should cover why the steps are important, what the hazards are, and what could go wrong. In practice, effective training often involves classroom sessions, field walkthroughs of the procedure, and sometimes simulators or drills for critical operations like emergency shutdowns. After training, OSHA also requires the employer to verify that the employee understood the training. This could be a test, or an observation of the operator performing tasks, or an oral quiz, whatever works to confirm they truly get it. And you document this. Keep records of who was trained, when, and how you verified their knowledge. This isn't just red tape. It helps ensure no one slips through the cracks unprepared. You don't want an untrained person fumbling through an operation with hazardous chemicals. Training isn't a one-and-done thing either. People can forget details over time or develop bad habits, so that's why refreshers every few years, or after any procedure update, are vital. It's also a chance to retrain on any lessons learned from incidents or near misses involving procedural issues. Now, beyond formal training, there's the matter of ensuring procedures are actually followed in day-to-day work. This is partly about workplace culture. If the culture tolerates shortcuts or tribal knowledge in place of written procedures, then even the best manual will collect dust. Management and supervisors need to set the expectation that procedures are to be used. A great practice is for supervisors to observe operations and gently remind or coach operators to use the written procedures, especially for non-routine tasks. Some sites even incorporate a pre-job brief where the team reviews the relevant procedure before starting a job. One of the pitfalls we see is simply not using them. The procedures exist, but operators rely on memory or informal methods. Over time, those methods drift from the approved steps. We're all guilty of sometimes saying, "I've done this 100 times, I know what I'm doing," and skipping the checklist. That deviation creep can lead to big trouble. A tragic example: the BP Texas City refinery explosion in 2005. During startup of a unit, operators routinely deviated from the written startup procedure. They had developed an informal workaround that wasn't in the books. The official procedure wasn't being followed or kept updated, and management wasn't aware of the deviations. As a result, the tower was overfilled with flammable liquid, leading to a massive explosion that killed 15 people and injured 180. Investigators found that several operating procedures were outdated or absent, and that this normalization of deviance, doing things not by the official procedure, was a major factor. It's a stark reminder: procedures only protect you if they are current and actually used. Another real-world incident: the DuPont La Porte toxic gas release in 2014. In that case, workers were troubleshooting a problem, and there were no proper procedures or training for what they were doing. Methyl mercaptan, a highly toxic gas, was accidentally released and tragically killed 4 workers. OSHA later stated that those deaths happened because DuPont did not have proper safety procedures in place, and employees weren't trained on what to do if certain safety systems, like ventilation fans, failed. In other words, people were left improvising in a dangerous situation. Had there been a clear procedure and training for that scenario, those lives might have been saved. This illustrates how critical it is to have procedures for emergency and upset conditions and to ensure everyone knows them. It's not just about normal operations. What do you do when something goes wrong? That should be in a procedure too, and every operator should be drilled on it. To enforce procedure use, companies also implement audits and drills. A supervisor might do a field audit, randomly asking an operator during a task, "Hey, show me the procedure you're using for this." Or they might simulate an emergency and see if everyone follows the written emergency procedure. The point isn't to police in a punitive way, but to catch bad habits and reinforce good ones. It also provides feedback. If an operator consistently finds a procedure hard to use, maybe it needs improvement. As the Bluefield process safety folks say, an effective SOP is one that is well written, up to date, and actually used by properly trained employees. When those pieces come together, you get the safety and consistency benefits the procedures are supposed to deliver.
To wrap up, operating procedures might not be the flashiest part of process safety, but they are absolutely foundational. Think of them as the bridge between the process design and the people who run it. They ensure that the knowledge of how to run safely is captured and shared, not just passed down by word of mouth or, worse, left to chance. A well-developed operating procedure, kept current and followed diligently, can prevent the kind of mistakes that lead to catastrophes. It guides operators through normal operations and the toughest of situations, maintaining that margin of safety at every step. In this video, we covered how to develop clear and accessible procedures, what content they must include, from operating phases and limits to safety info, the importance of keeping them updated, and training everyone to actually use them. We also looked at real incidents that show the high cost of procedural failures, and conversely, how following good procedures can save lives and equipment. Operating procedures should be clear, appropriate for their purpose, and always followed. They are living documents that support your operators. When in doubt, write it down, communicate it, train it, and enforce it. That's how we turn lessons learned into lessons applied every single day. Thank you for watching and being committed to process safety. If you found this explainer helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with your colleagues. And subscribe to our channel for more insights into each element of PSM and other process safety topics. Together, let's keep our facilities safe and our operations smooth. Stay safe out there and see you next time.